Hi, this is Amber.
And this is Lisa.
And you're listening to Unexplained Arkansas, a new podcast that explores urban legends, mysteries, and the unsolved in the natural state.
We're just two best friends discussing the unexplained in Arkansas.
Hey everybody, this is Unexplained Arkansas, and I'm Amber.
And I'm Lisa.
And this is episode 37 called Ozark Folk Healing and Magic. Now, this is a part of several episodes that I've been researching over the last couple of months that are geared toward folklore. And we're going to discuss specifically folk healing and things.
You didn't tell me it was magic.
Oh, folk healing and magic. Yes. If you had read the thing I put on last night, it said folk healing and magic.
I don't think it mentioned magic, actually.
Yes. Okay.
Let's pull it up.
Yeah.
You go on.
It does. Yes. Okay, so we always start off by describing the area that we're talking about. So we are going to be specifically referencing the Ozarks, which is approximately a 45,000...
Heifer says folk healing.
Oh, it says... Oh, I thought I said folk healing and magic. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, there's some magic thrown in, not magic like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but, there's two different types of healers that we are going to talk about, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so we always start off by describing the area we are talking about. In this episode, we will be describing specific stories and customs that were said to take place in the Ozarks and specifically in northern Arkansas. And a lot of these will have, a lot can date back to the 1800s. Most of them actually will be the 1800s, but some of it also the early 1900s, when Vance Randolph, who is the person who wrote this book that I'm covering, when he was there, it was the I think the 1920s, 30s, whatever, that time period. The Ozarks are approximately 45,000 square land miles, and I didn't know this until I researched it, but it's the size of the state of New York. And the Ozarks cover most of the southern half of Missouri and northwestern and north central Arkansas, as well as much smaller portions of northeastern Oklahoma and southeastern Kansas. Now, where Lisa and I live, we're at the very, very beginning of the Ozarks. We live near a place called Rosebud, which is almost like the gateway to the Ozarks, and Heber Springs, I guess you could say, is also kind of like a gateway to the Ozarks. Heber Springs is a gateway to the Ozarks, and Mountain View could be considered the Ozarks. It's
Does
beautiful.
Branson claim to be the gateway to the Ozarks as well?
Branson is the Ozarks. Branson is totally smack dab in the middle. Yes, but they are smack dab in the middle of the Ozarks. Yes. Now, the person that we'll be talking about, of course, is Vance Randolph, who he was kind of like an anthropologist, I guess you could say, and a folklorist who wrote a wide range of topics about traditional Ozark culture, and he did this for both academic and popular pursuits in the 1930s to the present. The book I'll be talking about today is Ozark Superstitions, which was first published by Columbia Press in 1947, but then it was reissued as Ozark Magic and Folklore in 1964. And interestingly enough, I obtained a copy of the 1964 book, Ozark Magic and Folklore, after an eBay search, and I was able to purchase it. It was not as expensive as I thought it would be. It was only like $15, but it is a book from the 60s.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to collect. I like to collect books from the 60s and 50s and all that, and I also like to collect books about Arkansas. So for me, that was a steal. Yeah. So just very briefly, for most of the 40s and 50s, Vance lived in Arkansas, mostly in Eureka Springs, which of course is in the heart of the Ozarks. He also lived in Fayetteville and married a folklore researcher and English professor from the U of A in Fayetteville. Now, he published lots of different things. He published comedies. He published all kinds of folklore books, and some of them, let's see here, Hot Springs and Hail, which was 1965, Ozark Folklore, a Bibliography in 1972, and Pissing in the Snow, which was 1976, and that was a collection of bawdy folk tales, and it was a pretty popular book. Now,
what was it about?
I don't know.
Specifically about going to the bathroom in the snow?
I don't know. I've never seen that book. I've never run into that book, so I cannot tell you. Now, in 1978, Randolph was elected a Fellow of the American Folklore Society. He died on November 1st, 1980, in Fayetteville, and is buried in the National Cemetery there in Fayetteville. So I think next time I'm up that way, I may visit. Now, he, of course, is a folklorist, and he's an anthropologist. However, he is not someone that is an expert on the subject. He's just basically reporting what he sees. And there's very few people that will, tell you these days that they are a folk healer in the traditional sense. But they're still out there. They are actually still out there. There is one that's pretty famous in Arkansas, and he's published several books, and his name is Brandon Weston, and I've kind of researched him and looked at his website and all, his stuff, and he says on his website, again, his name is Brandon Weston. He says that I'd first like to acknowledge the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw, and earlier indigenous peoples who called the Ozarks home before their forced removal and who are still struggling to reclaim their land and traditions and identities today. Brandon Weston claims to be a spiritual healer, folklorist, and writer living in the Arkansas Ozarks. And again, according to him, specific folk traditions that have had a great influence on the Ozark folkways included European cunning craft, Cajun Creole folk medicine, indigenous healing practices from diverse nations in the southeastern U.S., Western African folk traditions by way of Southern root work, hoodoo, and conjure, and even things from Central and South America. And, so he pretty much gives like a history about folk healing, where it came from, and things like that. So he's pretty much the only current person that I can find that practices, that is fairly well known and lives in our state. So
question. So what is a folk healer, or am I jumping ahead?
You're jumping ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll get to that. Okay.
Yes. Okay, so most of our information from here on out will come from Ozark Superstitions and the later edition, which of course is Ozark Magic and Folklore. Now, back in the 1900s early and then the 1800s, regular physicians were pretty scarce in the Ozarks. Instead, according to Vance Randolph, many cold and flu doctors, as they were called, were actually practicing illegally. Now, I'm not saying they all were, but there were a lot that were practicing illegally. Some would have maybe a couple of years of medical training, but then there were others that would pick up doctrine, quote unquote, by working with an older physician. So they basically were an apprentice. Now, most regular physicians and self-taught physicians lived in the bigger villages and towns around the Ozarks, but in the backwoods of the Ozarks, however, there were what were called yarb doctors and nature doctors and rubbing doctors. And then there were also granny women, which we'll talk primarily about yarb doctors and granny women. Now, they call them yarb doctors because they said yarb instead of herb, and I thought, well, that pronunciation cannot be right. So I got on a YouTube video, and a professor did pronounce it yarb. So either that's the right pronunciation, or he got it wrong as well.
So you're saying the word, which I always say herb. Herb, so he's saying that's yarb.
Yeah, Y-A-R-B is how you spell yarb, doctor. Yeah. And I've looked it up in several different mediums, and it all says yarb, Y-A-R-B. Yes.
Instead of like H-E-R-B, is that what we're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So Randolph said there were plenty of women that would become yarb doctors and nature doctors and rubbing doctors. Some men that became yarb doctors were also preaching, and they would practice medicine on the side. And this medicine, a lot of the time, would include mainly barks, roots, herbs, things of that nature. Many were given many of these concoctions were given through teas or boiled down into paste. And a lot of yarb doctors were big believers in poultices, and I hope I am saying that right. It's either poultices or poultices. And what these are soft, moist masses of material, specifically plant material, or sometimes they put it in flour and water and then apply them to the body to relieve soreness and inflammation, and kept in place. And they were kept in place sometimes with a cloth. I'm trying to think of a reference to that. I don't know if you watched the Hunger Game movies, but there was a scene where the mom puts on something called snow coat on, what's the cute guy? I don't even remember his name now. Gale. That's kind of what a poultice is, and many of them were made with lard, actually, with lard, fried onions. That was a pretty popular one.
Oh, gross.
Yes, sometimes they would add camphor, turpentine, things like that, and there were some that had chicken manure mixed with lard. Oh. I bet that smelled amazing. It made me think of a horrific nightmare Vicks vapor rub, actually, the whole time I was reading this.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Chicken houses. Ugh.
Yeah. But
disgusting.
Yeah, but you have to think there were no hospitals around, and they had to do something because people were getting sick. People didn't really understand about the spread of viruses and bacteria yet. And, when there were wounds and things like that, a lot of the time the cuts and wounds were not dressed properly, and then infection would set in.
Putting chicken poo in your wound has to heal.
Well, I don't think they put it
part of it.
I think that was actually for something else. I don't know. But in the article In Defense of Granny Women by Janet Alured, she said that physicians were poorly trained, inept, and even dangerous sometimes during the 19th century. Like, for instance, Civil War doctors, for example, had no real knowledge of germs, and they didn't always keep their hands clean, and they may explain away diseases as the will of God. So the quality of their education would vary widely, and especially down here in the South.
And didn't they believe? They were doing a lot of bleedings and so forth. And
there was. Well, I don't know if they were bleeding people out then. I'm not sure. I always think of Gone with the Wind, because I've seen that movie several times. I think of the doctor. The scene where Scarlett is helping with the hospital, and it's overrun with people, and people who are just everywhere lying in the street, and then this doctor's taking this dude's leg off without any kind of anesthesia. Yeah, that's kind of what I think about. But even the most well-trained doctors at the time were powerless against some diseases, because these effective drugs we use now were not available. So they just kind of did what they could to alleviate the symptoms. And, there's that aspect. And then there's also the aspect of, well, you're in rural South, you're in, a rural part of America. Sometimes people preferred somebody they knew, a more familiar person using herbal remedies. A lot of these times, in a lot of these situations, they were prescribed by family women and by the more specialized granny women. So granny women were like yarb doctors.
And people still don't trust doctors for some reason. I mean, I'm not one of those people, but I mean...
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. I know my mom did not, fully trust doctors. And then look at how many people... Yeah, we won't get into it, but denied, just even... Or were leery, and I was probably one of them at first, of the COVID vaccinations. Yeah. So, they're still, people still like to use who they know, even though, it's interesting.
There is some comfort in it. Now, folk medicine, especially knowledge of healing herbs, was a largely feminine art. However, yarb doctors could be male or female. And typical remedies just used household ingredients, but sometimes they used specific roots. They used specific flowers, things like that. Now, granny women... A lot of the time, unfortunately, they could not, let's say somebody needed a surgery. Well, a granny woman couldn't do that. A lot of the time, what they could do is alleviate the symptoms. Now, according to Alured, the writer, granny women might perform a number of rituals that a doctor found silly. Some were designed to give the mother psychological, if not physical, relief from her pain in labor, because granny women typically were the ones that delivered the baby, and they were called on. A lot of the times there would be a granny woman or a midwife, we call them midwives, would go from home to home and help deliver babies. And quite often midwives would, train an apprentice, or their daughter would become a midwife, like their mother. Now, granny women weren't just midwives, though. They had certain rituals. Some of them were very superstitious, and some of them would eventually. Some granny women would combine manufactured pills that eventually came out with their tried and true home remedies.
But question: were they all grannies?
I don't know. That's just what they called them. Yeah, that's just what they called them. And, well into the 30s and 40s, they were still practicing. And, at that point, they were, adding actual medicines and things to what they're doing. So, and I found one thing pretty interesting. While a doctor may perceive his job to be finished once he delivers a child, a midwife stayed to care for the newborn and the recovering mother. She might wrap the newborn in its father's shirt or its mother's petticoat for luck. Many midwives would wash the newborn's eyes in the mother's milk or even the mother's urine. And that's kind of gross. Yes. Yes. And so, we talk and we see, because, we go to different cemeteries and this and that, in our research, but we see a lot of situations where children pass away or mothers pass away after birth. But I didn't know this, but according to Alured, most of those deaths were from some type of fever and not necessarily the childbirth itself, but maybe an infection afterward. So that was basically the leading cause of maternal death in the 19th century. The most dangerous
was just
time,
infection and running fever.
Yep. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So the most dangerous time for the mother was 10 to 30 days after the birth, when bacteria it was introduced into the womb and could potentially spread. Yeah. But by the late 1800s, there was a germ theory out, and it was a lot more understood. People were washing their hands a little bit more, and midwives and physicians were kind of changing what they were doing. And, pretty quickly in the late 1800s, that mortality rate declined rapidly. Yeah. But you talked about, and I wanted to talk about this real fast. You talked about people not really trusting doctors. Well, another reason people didn't trust doctors is because they were afraid of hypodermic needles. And Vance Randolph talks about this in his book.
My sister's still like that.
Oh, I don't like them at all. In the old days, hypodermic needles were used chiefly to inject opiates, and very often a doctor was not called unless a patient was desperately ill, like they were about to die. So the physician would give a shot of morphine or something like that. So pioneers in Arkansas and the Ozarks would regard the needle as kind of a death sentence, a death warrant. Yeah, and that is why, Vance Randolph said that back, big old husky backwoodsmen were deathly afraid of hypodermic needles because of that. Yeah.
And they were probably dirty needles.
Oh, who knows? But even children in schools who were getting vaccinated, it was terrifying. It was terrifying for them. Yeah. So there's that. And then,
so some things don't change.
Yeah, some things have never changed, yes. So as far as finding barks and roots for the yarb doctors and granny women, roots were a big market back then. Now, you're only supposed to dig for roots in the fall, which I did not know that because I've never been into roots. But you're
what kind of roots? What does this mean?
Well, I have a list here I'm going to read of different ones, but you're supposed to dig them in the growing season, and bark, however, is best gathered in late winter and early spring. And then leaves and herbs should be collected while the plants are blooming. Flowers should be picked when they're first open, and seeds should be gathered as soon as they are ripe. So there were people that would actually make a living doing all these things. They were like gathering up the roots and the bark and the seeds and the flowers, and then they would dry them slowly, and they would not ship them until they were perfectly dry. So they would sell these, and probably in newspapers, things like that from the 1800s, we could probably find ads for people that sold these types of things to yarb doctors and just people in general for health reasons. Yeah.
Yeah.
And lots of people made a good living just gathering roots and herbs. So you were asking specifically, here are some remedies for colds and coughs. Now, let me tell you, I am not a doctor. I have never been to medical school. I don't even claim to have a Google medical degree. Please don't go home and start whipping up any of these things that I'm talking about. This is what people did 200 years ago. And I'm asking you, please just go to Walgreens and get some Tylenol. Yeah. Yes. Do not. I mean, I know some of this sounds woo, but let's not do this. I am not a doctor, and I'm not giving medical information to you at all. I'm just stating historical fact. So some of the remedies...
Alleged historical
fact.
Yes.
So some of the remedies for colds and cough include mullein flower tea, and I'm not even sure what that is. Then sumac berry tea. Now, I've heard of sumac before, but
I've heard of sumac. Yeah.
I think I'm allergic to that, actually.
Sounds like something I would be allergic to.
You're allergic to everything.
Yes.
Okay. Pine needles seeped in water with sorghum. That was pretty popular back then. And then gargling with cider and adding salt and pepper to the cider. And I'm not sure what kind of cider. Then red pepper tea with butter and water added. That sounds gross.
That sounds so gross.
Yes. And then young people were sometimes given skunk oil, which was made from the fat of skunks for things like croup. And if you have never had to deal with croup, it's so scary. My middle son had chronic croup. That means anytime the weather got funky or his allergies or whatever started flaring, he would get some kind of case of croup, and we would end up in the ER or the doctor's office, and it was terrible. It was to the point that we had to have one of those little machines at our house so we could give him breathing treatments at home.
Breathing?
Yes, it was horrible. And then when he when he got a little older, we got his adenoids and tonsils taken out, and his croup was much better after that. Okay. But you know, it's so scary because your babies are having trouble breathing, and I just you know, I just shudder at the thought.
Yeah, the worst.
It was awful. It really was. Now, this sort of sound familiar because we just talked about tuberculosis, but according
so
to
go back and listen to that episode.
Yes, it was a couple of episodes ago. But drinking fresh warm blood was said to be a cure for lung trouble.
Okay.
Yes.
Right to the blood. All right.
Yes. And then
that reminds me of Grady Hendrix novel. Anyway, moving forward.
Okay. And then also there was a common mixture with butterfly weed. And I looked up all these things that I didn't know what they looked like. And so some of it was pretty much toxic. Like butterfly weed is, I looked it up. Even though it treats pleurisy, it is actually very toxic. Okay. Yes. Yes. It's
there's nothing like a little toxin in your medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So tuberculosis, as we covered a couple of episodes ago, was a huge deal. It was horrible. People were dying left and right. It was one of the most common ways to die in the 1800s. But in the Ozarks, Hill folk did believe that drinking that fresh, warm blood was a treatment for lung trouble. Yes.
Great.
And Randolph writes about a couple who sold their farm, moved to a city so that their daughter who had consumption, and you know, we talked about consumption being another word for tuberculosis, but they moved to the city so that she could get fresh blood from a slaughterhouse every day.
Okay.
Yes.
Yikes.
Yes.
Ugh.
But you know, I mean, if it made their child better, I mean, I would do just about anything too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now, just to kind of round out some of these.
You try it once, right?
Yeah. Try it once. Okay, so diphtheria was a serious bacterial infection, and that was where the mucous membranes of the nose and throat are infected. And Ozark people were known to put a pinch of gunpowder in warm water or milk.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yes.
Some good old gunpowder and milk.
and then for asthma and hay fever, they would again use sumac leaves and wild plum bark, which they would scrape the bark down. It actually matters which direction you scrape bark. Like if it's a peach tree, I think you're supposed to scrape up. If it's this wild plum bark, you're supposed to scrape down. I don't know. It's very interesting.
There's a science to it.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yes. But okay, so cuts and scrapes, they would use chimney soot and molasses made up into one of those poultice concoctions, and they would put it on there. So all that just sounds ugh. Yeah. And then finally, stomach ailments. They would use angelica root and red pepper tea, catnip tea. And,
tea?
Catnip is a plant. So, yeah, they would use catnip tea. And then I'm assuming this is for gas, but I'm not sure. Because Randolph describes it as the wind of the stomach.
Oh, yeah.
What else could that be besides gas?
I'm thinking that's gas.
Yes. So strong onion tea every 15 minutes for wind of the stomach.
Okay. Maybe, yeah, I mean gas
I think
can
that
hurt.
would produce more gas. I don't know.
Onion, yeah. I mean, I would think so, but yeah. I don't have any words for that. That's
okay.
I'm trying to think of all the gas.
Yes, and
gas
they like to use onions on things.
Yeah.
Same with like earaches
and blood. Drinking blood, little onions, no big deal.
Yes.
You're cured.
They would use all kinds of things. Like for earaches, they would use skunk oil for that too, or goose grease. I don't even know what goose grease is.
Now this was told to me. So something that they did in I would say the 50s was okay, so a lady I worked with, Gwen, she said that her mother, who was not a smoker, the cure for earaches was to blow smoke in the child's ear.
Yep, I got it
and
right
here.
here.
And she would do that.
That's in the book.
She's
right. Yes.
That's what she told me. Her mom would do.
It says some yarb doctors treat earaches simply by blowing tobacco smoke into the ear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If this doesn't give relief, they blow the smoke into a cup of warm water with a reed or pipe stem and put a few drops of the smoke water into the ear at intervals. So.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Okay. Well, I saved the best one for last.
Okay. Good.
I've got some more, but okay. So hemorrhoids. Okay. So first,
yes, let's talk about this.
Okay. So, I don't talk about hemorrhoids enough, I think. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. We've never had a conversation about the
hemorrhoids. Yes. Okay. So back then they called them piles. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around why they were called piles.
Okay.
Like piles. And so when somebody would...
Like Piles.
L-E-S. Yes.
Okay.
Like piles. So when somebody get the piles, there was, certain things they would try to do to help. Well, Randolph interviewed someone who said that the old woman that lived down the street had a really bad case of the piles. Okay. And so she got a clean new pair of underwear from the general store, and she wrapped $1 bill in there, and no, it gets worse. And she took it to her neighbor's house and asked the woman to wear those underwear for 10 days. And then it's in the book. It's in the book. Okay. And then send it back to her unwashed, and she would wear it for 3 days, and that would cure her piles.
What
in
the world? Like,
that story goes on for a page and a half, and I'm not sharing the whole thing because it's gross.
Whoever came up with this was probably laughing, be like, look what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Look what kind of craziness I'm going to concoct that these women are going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is just insane.
Yeah. Long story short, because he does go on for, like I said, a page and a half about that poor old lady and her piles. They never did cure up. So, yeah.
Oh, really? I mean, really? I mean, I was thinking really old underwear with, gross money in it should.
Well, the woman sent the $1 back. That is in the story. The woman sent the $1 back. She humored the old lady and gave her the dirty underwear, and gave her the $1 back. So,
oh gosh.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Ugh. So going.
And I thought drinking blood was. I mean, bring on the blood.
Yeah. So okay. So now we're kind of going into the next phase here with yarb doctors. They were very much into not all of them, but some of them were into astrology, and specific things had to be happening, celestially or with the moon, the sky, or whatever. For instance, on the whole, it seems that yarb medicines for internal use were best taken in the dark of the moon or when the moon is waning. And, that was pretty much what they went by. Now, there are also signs of the zodiac to be taken into account. A great number of people believe that stomach trouble is most likely to be acquired or aggravated when the moon is in Cancer, diseases of the throat during the sign of Taurus, and venereal infections in Scorpio.
Oh, man. I'm a Scorpio.
Yes, but there's a lot of talk of venereal disease in this book, and I was quite surprised, and there's some treatments that are downright hilarious for that, too.
Well, I bet, because people weren't utilizing safe sexual practices.
Yes.
I guess, when was the condom even formed? Do you know?
I have no idea.
I'll Google.
Okay. But so people were very, they were very careful about the appropriate sign, being under Gemini or whatever, during certain operations, certain things. And, not everybody. This is not everyone, this is just a few people. But like I said, Randolph looked at this like an anthropological study, and he wrote everything that he was told and everything that he saw. Now, one thing he did note was that there were actual specific cases, and several, unfortunately, where
the first condom existed in 1855. These people were just being lazy.
So Randolph noted that there was some interesting cases where actually granny women and yarb doctors could have potentially been responsible for a patient's death. So in other words, they were either directly or indirectly responsible for someone's death. Mm-hmm. They may not have meant to, they may have just been trying to help, but they ended up being part of the issue. So in one case, Randolph said that a yarb doctor that he knew neglected to encourage a patient to seek out a surgeon for appendicitis, and he ended up passing away. Mm. Yes, and another issue was that people like granny women and yarb doctors were sometimes administering things like turpentine, and that could cause, and that could cause nephritis, which of course leads to death. Mm-hmm. So
I would use turpentine to clean my brushes. So,
yeah, that's some strong stuff. Okay, yes. So we've talked about the yarb doctors and we've talked about the granny women. Now, Randolph goes on to talk about another kind of quote-unquote doctor, and he calls these people power doctors. And they are a completely different type, okay?
Did they have, like, shoulder pads?
I don't know. Well, they would prescribe to a different type of healing, a more spiritual type of healing.
Oh, a higher power.
Yes, exactly. Gotcha. So these Ozark power doctors use spells, prayers, magic, exorcisms, amulets, and other charms in their spiritual practices, and that's quote unquote from the book. They were backwoods,
not made up.
Now, he never mentions exorcisms again in the book that I have found so far.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He just likes to throw that word in there there. And then
threw it in there. He said they use prayers, magic, spells, exorcisms, amulets, and other charms.
Moving on.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, okay, moving on. And I'm like, no, I want to hear more about the exorcisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
all right, so let's talk about some Ozark exorcisms. Or let's talk about some Ozark exorcisms here.
Or maybe more venereal disease.
Gross. Okay, so they were backwoods specialists. They would claim, and they would say that they could cure certain ailments. Now, one very famous type of power doctor was a blood stopper, and this is the first time I have heard of this as well.
I thought you were going to name like their name, but no.
There's no names given. So there was a woman in the Ozarks that Randolph knew that had a great reputation as being a blood stopper, and he goes on to tell a story about a wounded man that was brought to her home in a wagon, and the whole wagon was covered in blood. The man's friends were unable to stop the bleeding, and it had come from 2 very deep knife cuts. Ooh. So apparently this blood stopper woman looked at the patient, then walked out to the barn alone with a Bible under her arm. Mm-hmm. In about 3 minutes, the bleeding stopped, and the healer returned to her house. She would take no money for blood stopping, and she would not discuss her method. She was not a religious woman either, and rarely looked at the Bible, except when she was asked to stop the flow of blood. The old woman confided to a friend that she had already imparted the secret to 3 persons, and that if she ever told a 4th, the power would be taken from her.
Okay.
Yeah. So
kind of like the genie, 3 wish.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently this blood stopping business, it was pretty well known, and a man named Otto Rayburn of Eureka Springs did talk about it to Vance Randolph and said that we had a neighbor at Caddo Gap who could do it. Our 11-year-old son had a severe case of bleeding, and we were unable to stop it by ordinary methods. We told our neighbor, and he asked the boy's full name, then went out into the yard and repeated a few words. We couldn't hear them, and lo and behold, the bleeding stopped.
Now, you say Caddo. Is that correct?
Yeah. Cato. Is it Cato Gap or Caddo Gap?
I have no idea. I've always wondered. So.
I think it's Caddo Gap, but somebody will correct us. So.
Yeah, we do have, I believe her name is Mary on the Facebook that is very good because she taught us how to say, like we said Dacia and she said it's Deshay County.
Yes.
So she was, so Mary, phone us in.
Yeah, I think it might be Cattle Gap, but heck, I don't know. Anyway, I do not know how to explain such things, the guy said, but it did happen.
Okay.
Yes. And so he knew of another blood stopper who would repeat certain verses from the 16th chapter of Ezekiel. He walks toward the east while repeating the lines, "A man who has the power may tell the secret Wait, let me redo that. He walks toward the east while repeating the lines from Ezekiel. And a man who, according to Randolph, a man that has this power of blood stopping may tell the secret to 3 women. A woman who has the power of blood stopping may tell it to, 3 men. She may tell it to 3 men.
Okay.
Yes. And
so it must be the opposite sex telling.
Exactly.
Got it.
So another case was a woman who was a blood stopper repeating the 6th verse, 16th chapter of Ezekiel. And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thine own blood, I said unto thee, when thou waste in thy blood, live. Yea, I said unto thee, when thou waste in thy blood, live. So, yeah, there's that. And then finally, there was an older gentleman who told Randolph that there was a secret of blood stopping and cautioned never to write it down, never to publish it, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So pretty interesting.
It has to be
word of mouth.
Word of mouth. And passed down to the opposite sex.
Yes.
Okay.
And wart witches, same thing. People that can remove warts. So supposedly there are people that can...
witches.
Yes. But supposedly there are people that can mysteriously remove warts. Now, I know this one to be true, and I knew this before I even read it, because I have a great-grandparent who apparently could remove warts, and he only told one person, and that was one of his not nieces. It was one of his granddaughters. And, she told me she can't tell me. So, yes.
Okay, so
this was a thing.
You just knew this was a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did you witness them moving the warts?
I don't know. Bo's been to her house before and came back with no warts, and I'm just kidding. No.
I've never had a wart.
Yeah.
In my life.
It was a huge deal.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Superstitious.
So people made a business pretty much out of wart removal.
Okay.
And they were called wart witches. And some hill folk also prefer to lose their own warts at a crossroad. Everything happens at a crossroad. Yes. Or
oh my.
Yes.
Okay.
So apparently they take a grain of corn for each wart and place each grain in the road under a small thin stone. The warts will be taken over by the person or animal that moves the stones. So you just pass the warts on.
Oh, well, that's horrible.
Yeah. Yep.
Ugh.
Interesting. Yes.
Interesting.
Uh-huh. And then
warts and venereal diseases. Okay.
Yes. And then he goes on to talk about headaches too, and how they can be conjured off by putting a lock of one's hair under a stone and not mentioning either the hair or the treatment for 7 days. There's just lots of this stuff in this book. Yes.
Headaches stink. I know a lot of people that are like, hey, let's try it.
Yeah, they try anything.
They have those migraines, chronic migraines. Ugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I have seen people use copper and things like that for rheumatoid arthritis, and that is mentioned here.
Even to this day, they sell those copper bracelets for people to wear and such. So.
Apparently, that's where this kind of stemmed from. Yes. Also, wearing a green ring is good for people who have weak or defective eyesight. Again, I am not a doctor. I'm just repeating.
A green ring.
Yes. And then finally, they, one of the oddest things that I saw was the Ozarks believing in, quote unquote, a hair of the dog that bit ya. And we've had
we discussed this.
Yes, so in the Ozarks, it does not necessarily simply mean a morning shot of whiskey or some other, because that's what the hair of the dog is. The hair of the dog that bit you. It means you get drunk the night before, and then the next morning you have a drink of some kind, and it's supposed to be, quote unquote, the hair of the dog that bit you. So, during this time, people would
we said I had never heard that before, and it's crazy.
Yes. Okay, but during this time, people actually would swallow the hair from the dog that bit them, and to try to keep them from getting sick. Yeah.
Or like rabies or whatever.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah,
I'm not swallowing hair.
Yeah.
Gross.
So yeah, these these things were not like, I mean, I'm sure there were lots of people that didn't believe these things, but there were plenty that did. There were plenty that did. Yeah.
Just like with superstitions and such. So.
Yeah. Just like with superstitions and things like that. So, and,
or like not doing your laundry on the first day of the year. Oh, wait, that's you.
Yeah, that's me. That's definitely me. Yeah.
Go back to is that the Ozark superstition?
Yes, that's Ozark superstitions.
There. Just hear about Amber's family's superstitions with laundry regarding the first of the year.
Yes. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have for herbal healing and folk healing and things like that. But there is a ton more. Like I said, there are still people that practice this, but they are few and far between.
What's his name?
Brandon Weston. He has, he has a website. He's written, quite a few books, it looks like.
Okay.
And, some of these old traditions are kept alive by anthropologists and historians and people that are interested in Arkansas folklore. Definitely.
I'm interested. So people email us if you have gone to a healer. I'm interested in knowing that. So,
yes.
How about that?
Like I said, there's so much more to it, and so much more to the quote unquote healers from back in the day in the Ozarks. This is just one book with, certain things that I read. But if anybody has any cool old stories from their family, let us know. Let us know,
or
definitely.
If you have any other stories about venereal disease.
Oh, gross. Would you quit saying venereal disease? Gross.
Okay. So we do have pod business, so do it.
Go ahead.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm waiting on the business end.
Okay, so we didn't really do any pod business at the end of... What episode is this now? 36?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, we don't even know anymore, guys. We have so many episodes. So that is part
37.
of
We're on 37 right now.
So this will be 37, and we're laying these out on Mondays and Thursdays, kind of. That's the plan. So just note that that's how we're going to do. So we are super appreciative of the Patreon. So go check out our Patreon. Check us out on the Facebook group. Our Facebook group is huge, and that is thanks to all of you Facebook groupers that we love.
Facebook groupers.
Facebook groupers. And Instagram. So Instagram, check us out on the Instagram. Please go and subscribe on YouTube. And please give us a 5-star rating. So we really appreciate 5-star ratings. So on the Spotify, wherever you're listening, the Apple, please just rate us. So yeah. And reach out to us on Unexplained Arkansas at Gmail. And also, we've gotten some great... we don't even discuss every single message we get, because, how many messages a day do we get, Amber? Seriously, we get a lot. A lot. Yeah. We are so thankful.
More than I ever thought we would get.
I know, it is amazing. So constantly, we are engaging with you, so engage with us. But yeah, so we don't even discuss every single communication, but we are appreciative. But yes, mail us at the P.O. Box 120, Searcy, Arkansas 72145. We will give you a shout out. So we did get an awesome note this week from, he's an OG, Sean. So thank you so much, Sean. And we posted his amazing artwork on the envelope. It was quite impressive, so go check that out.
He put some swag from his retro modern business, so and we have that on Facebook as well.
Yes, so go check that out. And then we got a sweet note for one of our Patreon ladies, Jennifer. So thank you so much for the sweet
Jennifer. Thanks,
mail.
Friend.
We love mail, and the Patreon people are getting just a lot of extras, guys. So just for $1, you can be a part of the Patreon Nation.
Yes, Patreon Nation. The Unexplained Nation. Yes.
Unexplained.
Something. Yeah.
And that's all the pod biz I have. So
okay. Awesome. Okay. All right. So, we are in full summer mode now, so everything is going to be summer. So we will have
summer. No, that's not the same.
That's it. You're singing an ABBA song right now, I think, or you're trying to. I think it's Money that you're trying to sing. Okay. Right. So yeah, we're on total summer brain right now. So some of the things we'll be talking about will be more summery and things like that. Summery spooky. Yeah.
Summery venereal disease.
Would you quit saying that? That is what my
started it.
Well, that's what my grandmother would call them. Like when we were running around the 90s saying STD, she was going, well, I think they have a venereal disease. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
I have a quick story, an L story. She's probably going to die. But she would call PE, and it was just funny. She would call it VD. Somehow, and it would come out VD, and I'm like, and me and Daryl are looking at each other like, she could like, yeah, I had VD today, and we were
my gosh,
what did you have today? Anyway, moving forward.
Oh my gosh. Well, but we do appreciate all of our listeners, and we will be on social media later today, and we'll also have some cool pictures. Yeah, and we'll have some cool pictures to share from our most recent published episodes, and then the ones that will be published Thursday and Monday. Like I said, she said, we're on a Thursday, Monday cycle. So we've got some cool things to share with everybody. Then we will have things for Patreon, Patreon patrons. So there you go.
Patreon Nation.
Yeah. No, that's not going to stick.
Whatever.
All right. Okay.
Andy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Love ya.
Love ya. See you later. Bye.
Bye.